shit, like, you run on those things? And they're like, and they had no idea that their balance was that poor. Now, if you can't stand on one foot, in my world, you're not even walking, you're just falling from foot to foot.
Welcome to Bad Boy Running. As ever, we like to continue our conversations by then making spurious comments and getting in actual experts eventually to clean up the mess that we've caused in our aspersions. So to do exactly that, we have found one of the leading experts in running podiatry. Thank goodness they exist. Yes, yes. So welcome on the podcast, all the way from Australia, Tim Bransdon. Whee!
Thank you, boys. Glad to be on.
So, Tim, tell us about you're part of Running Labs. You specialize in running podiatry. Like, what comes first, the running or the podiatry, in terms of your development?
My development was, well, it's an interesting one. If we talk just pure running, running would have come first. I played rugby for a long time. I was a winger, so it was all about speed. And so I did a lot of sprint training, a lot of track training over the years. Then there was podiatry, still playing rugby. And then I spent a couple of years in your fair land playing some rugby with Blackheath. And then coming back to Australia when
Cool.
There's it's pretty dark back there, but there's a little bit of Blackheath on the wall over there. One of those jerseys.
Oh, no, decent team. Well, it's the start of the London Marathon as well, isn't it? It's quite a well-known rugby club.
Yep. Yeah, the oldest open rugby club in the world, which I think means the oldest non-school rugby club in the world, which was pretty good. There was rugby or sprint training, running. Rugby came first, then there was podiatry. And then when I got back to Australia after my couple of years in the UK, I started working more as a podiatrist and doing what I was taught at university. And so I'll call that traditional podiatry, which we can get into later. And then as things didn't quite...
Just to take it back, so is podiatry then its own university course that all the way through is podiatry? Or interesting. I assumed it would be, a classic 2 years of general this and then some go off physio, some go off podiatry. Oh, right. So right from the start, it's all about feet.
It's after the first year, you'd fairly easily transition off to physiotherapy, chiropractic. Like the first year subjects, yes, you could quite easily transition, but enrolled from the start with podiatry with the same group of people and went through. And then slowly but surely, things weren't quite adding up in what I was doing with traditional podiatry, and I started looking a bit deeper. And the running lab honestly came about when I stopped playing rugby, and I all of a sudden didn't have a reason to actually train. I loved training. I loved being in the gym. I loved running, but there was a purpose to it. And all of a sudden, I didn't have a purpose to it. So I was sort of getting into a little bit more longer distance running, and just to stay fit, really. And I spent quite a bit of time trying to analyze and think about the mechanics of running whilst I was running. And so tried different things, as we all have. You hear things, research things, and trying to change things while you run just doesn't work. And in hindsight, I can sit there and say it's like trying to change an aircraft engine mid-flight. It's a lot easier. You can bring that plane down, put it in the hangar, change whatever you want then. But changing the engine mid-flight is pretty hard. Changing the way you run while you run, very tricky in hindsight, I can tell you that. When I met two long-distance running coaches about the same time, one was Lee Saxby, who's comes from your land over there, and the other was Brian McKenzie and Jason Donaldson. So technically there's two there, but they work together, those two. And when I did both their courses around the same time, like my running changed dramatically, and it felt so different and it felt better, and people I ran with noticed it. And I'm not talking about performance and personal best and going to the Olympics or anything like that. Is that just things became smoother, things became lighter, and I felt like I could do it forever. So after a little while, I realized that all these people coming in with running injuries didn't necessarily need magic shoes. They didn't need magic orthotics. Like, they needed to learn how to run. Because if I took that comparison of running on the track, is that we spent so much time in sprint training doing drills, working on mechanics. It's very methodical. And then think about almost any other sport you could possibly play or train for. It's drills and very methodical. And when we see the performance out on the field of a skillful player, team, athlete, anywhere, we look at it and think, wow, it's just, beautiful, it's poetic, they're so talented, but what we don't see is all the hard work that was done in the training, in video analysis, and really breaking things down. So long story long is I started to think, well, who's going to teach these people how to run? Because if you go down to a track, there's a track coach and there's a few people, but sprinters make up 0.0001% of people who run. People run like you guys. You're going to sit there and run your first marathon, then your second, then your third. People run to lose weight. People run for fitness. They run in a gym because they're told to. They run for field sports. But nobody's actually teaching them how to run. And if we let everybody go into gyms and just, deadlift heavy weights without any direction at all, and yes, it does happen, but people run into trouble. They're going to get injured. They're going to break the back. And with running, it's
how about doing squats with no advice? Is that okay?
Yeah, same thing.
Okay.
All these things were natural. Well, the thing is, all these movements were natural, running included. We don't need to teach a toddler how to run, squat, pick things up, push things, pull things. It's perfect. Like, they do things to their advantage. So whatever the mechanical advantage is, they do. That's what toddlers do. But slowly but surely, life in our Western world, sit-in, shoes, just life in general, it takes away what was once natural. What are the three of us sitting on right now?
Chair.
Yeah.
Chairs. Yeah, right. We're sitting on chairs. We're not squatting. We're not sitting there, cooking over a fire, squatting, or preparing meals. We're sitting on chairs, and it changes what we are. And so to say that running or squatting or deadlifting or anything are natural movements, they're all natural movements. We've just lost the ability to perform them naturally. And so we actually end up paying a lot of money to find experts to teach us how to redo things. And so I'm not even sure if I answered your question, but let's give you one little line that I like to say is you want to have strong, healthy feet to run with. So if you say, is it podiatry first or running? In terms of what I can say now or this time later is, why wouldn't we want to have strong, healthy feet to run with? You want to squat, you're going to need some strong legs, strong core. You want to be a gymnast, you're going to need some strong shoulders. You want to be a swimmer, strong shoulders. Weightlifter, strong shoulders, strong legs. Runners, what do we do to strengthen feet?
And do you think because it is such a natural movement and it different from, say, going to the gym and other things which have been associated always with needing technical advice and technical support, do you think that the kind of the disconnection there is what puts people off seeking advice as to running technique and running coaching, and also to some extent the fact that people are more likely to or happy to pay to fix things rather than pay for prevention?
Something I learned early in this process of helping people with running is that you can't sell injury prevention.
No.
Nobody's paying for the injury they don't have. Nobody wants to be injured, but you can sell performance. You can absolutely sell performance. And if you do that well, and you're actually teaching someone to run more efficiently to perform better, then you're actually taking in the injury prevention as well. But yeah, it's hard to sell injury prevention, even though it is the one absolute way to never achieve your goal is to be injured. The absolute certainty.
But I think the challenge there, isn't it, is that if you sell on performance, that's great. But I think the majority of runners, are kind of casual runners, the kind of the one that makes up the bulk of casual runners who would never think anything that they're doing with running was in terms of performance. Yet they're probably the ones that need it the most. Are
you telling me they don't have one of these on every single time they run?
No, absolutely. That's what
I mean by performance.
But whether they
I'm not talking
themselves, but whether they think of themselves as some people don't even think of themselves as proper runners. That's the thing, and so they're the ones that probably need the most help. And to what extent though is it in the interests of chiropractors, physios, things like that because our experience of going to a podiatrist was there was a complete separation between you dealt with the foot. The issue here is your foot is this way. You deal with the foot, not even thinking about what I was using the foot for, or anything else like that. Is it when you mentioned before you had a problem, or you found some issues with traditional podiatry. Is that kind of what you were alluding to?
Yeah, traditional podiatry, in terms of how I was taught, I can only speak for that. It was very much about alignment. And so are the right pieces aligned? If not, how do we realign them? Orthotics and or shoes and or orthotics. So it's all about alignment. Is that if your heel was in line with your leg, that's considered a good thing. Now, if we look at pictures that sell orthotics, we see the lines on the back of the heel and the lines on the back of the leg. And initially they'll be like this because everything's out of alignment. And then you'll see them with orthotics being like this. Now, the thing with those joints there's 33 in each foot, 33 joints in each foot. So very simply, I say to people, if there's 33 joints, and think about any joint just there for one reason, movement. So if there's 33 of them in one single foot, how much do we think feet should move? Simple answer, lots. And then if we go one step further, in what direction? There's 33 joints. What direction should these joints move with the foot? All of them. Now, if we think 33 joints, they're literally designed to be four-wheel drives underneath this. So what is their alignment? Is that there is no perfect alignment. But what that foot does underneath you per step is super important. Now, for me, the simplest way I describe it is that feet have two jobs to do. Job number one is to be adaptable. Why there's 33 joints. Now, whether the human is going left, right, up, down, whether the road's got a camber, up, down, your trail running, no matter what we do, every time we change direction, that foot underneath you should be adaptable. That's job number one. And job number two of the foot's propulsion. It's actually got to push you somewhere. So we need a flexible, adaptable foot with those 33 joints to bend, twist, and move like a four-wheel drive underneath us. And then we need a foot that can actually tighten up and become the second part of the spring to push. So feet effectively should load and push all day, every day. They can't do that if they're stiff. You know, it's very hard to run in a ski boot. So stiff, rigid shoes.
Is this stiffness the orthotics, or is this stiffness the shoes? Because thinking of, I don't feel from my shoes as if they are stiff, but then I guess they've got padding that maybe prevents movement.
Well, padding, let's differentiate just for a moment, cushioning or padding and stiffness. So through the sole of the shoe, we're very often, let me go for a lucky dip. Sorry to those listeners, but I've got some shoes that are literally sitting here for those that are watching. So feel the noise for a little bit, boys. I'll be 12 seconds.
Be interested to hear as well what he was taught by the running people in his running style, because and just so you know, Tim, just so you know, Tim, we had Christopher McDougall on about 6 weeks ago as well. So most of our listeners will be primed to what he's been saying on the back of Born to Run, but then 12 years later. So we'll interweave that at some point. But yes, go ahead.
Fabulous. Well, I read his book at some point, and I honestly accused him of stealing all my best work. And then I realized that he actually wrote it a long time before I read that book, and a long time before I was even probably heading down this path. So there's so much that resonated in that book with me, and it's a very, very enjoyable read, which is a credit to him in how he actually wrote it. Now, if we come to a shoe with stiffness, really what I'm talking about with stiffness is if you grab the heel of a shoe, the ball of the foot of a shoe, does it bend or twist? And if it's stiff and rigid, how many of those 33 joints are actually able to do their job? Short answer is not many. And when you take away from what should be working, you add it somewhere else. So if you take away function somewhere, or you take away stress somewhere, you add it somewhere else. It doesn't disappear. So when we talk about stiffness in a shoe, I'm talking about the shoe actually being able to bend or twist long ways. Like if you change direction, or if the ground's a bit uneven and your foot can't move because it's locked inside a shoe, well, the joints further up have to do that. There's this thing there called your knee, which is, further up the leg, and it's not designed to bend and twist in crazy directions. It doesn't have 33 joints available to it. But if you lock up the foot and a large part of the ankle, if we talk about sort of hiking boots and things like that, then the torsion that the foot should be able to do in terms of that longitudinal movement through the foot, that's got to go up through the knee and then the hip and then the back and so on. So it's absolutely true that whatever the feet do affect everything north of them. They don't cause everything, they just affect everything. And so the better feet work, the more positive effect there is up the chain through the ankles, knees, hip and back. And so I'll never advocate. Sorry, go Jody.
How do we know which shoes then of the? Is it just Barefoot is the only one that doesn't do that, or is there a way we can look at different brands, different styles, and get a sense of which gives more freedom?
Yeah, so very loaded question. We can spend about 3 hours on the shoes. 4 simple rules that I run with. Rule number 1: shoes need to be light. Now, I've never had anyone argue with me on this one in any way, shape or form. Shoes need to be light. The heavier a shoe, the quicker fatigue sets in. And if we talk running specifically, running is about managing fatigue, because fatigue's going to get us in the end with running. Is that the longer we can be efficient and manage that fatigue, fantastic. If we've got a shoe on that's heavier, that's going to increase the rate that fatigue's going to decrease our efficiency and then lead to form breakdown and, not just performance going downhill, but also potential injury. So rule number 1, shoes need to be light. Rule number 2, shoes need to have a little bit of four-wheel drive. So a little bit of that flex through the middle, including football boots. Football boots are very often so stiff through there, but when you change direction, you actually want to have a little bit of movement through the shoe, through the boot, because your foot's there to aid that change of direction. And if you take that away, then it's hindering, again, just the ability for your foot to do its job, body. So rule number 1, light. Rule number 2, a little bit of four-wheel drive. Rule number 3, they should be the same shape as your toes. Now, you guys are in winter there. If you ever put gloves on, they kind of look like hands, same shape as your hands.
I'm looking at shoes now, by the way, just so you know. I'm looking at my trainers as you talk.
But when we actually buy shoes, very often they taper in at the toes. Now, if you guys just putting your fingers up there and hold them nice and tight together, if you've got any sticky tape around, just tape them up for me and see how long you last with your fingers squeezed together. Think about if you've got to open a tight jar, you're doing some cooking, you want to put a nice sauce in, you want to do some push-ups. There's not much we do with our fingers jammed together, yet most of our shoes taper in. And this is not just running shoes, this is most shoes. They all taper in towards the toes. So now you take away the balance, stability, and propulsion that toes aid because they're jammed together. So shoes, just plain and simple, should be wide enough for your toes. Yet we're all taught to measure how wide a shoe is at the ball of the foot. That's what we did when we used to try our school shoes on, measure at the ball of the foot. But nobody's really looking at what happens at the toes, because there's shoes that are plenty wide enough at the ball, but they taper in at the toes. Whereas this guy here is nice and square at the toes. And you can see that it's actually kind of just straight across and down. It's very rectangular. Now, that's unfortunately very, very rare, but the toes in that shoe are able to do their job. So we've got light, four-wheel drive, same shape as your toes. And the 4th rule, super important, comfortable. Comfortable. If it doesn't matter if it ticks those first 3 boxes, that means it's it's a decent shoe feature-wise. But when you put it on, 33 joints are going into there. I can't tell anybody, any patients of mine, any clients, I can't tell them what shoe to buy. I can get them close. Then when they put a shoe on, they've got to trust their instincts. How does it feel? Now, we're also going on a shoe that we're feeling in a shoe shop. And more often than not, if it's a running shoe, we don't run in it. We walk 6 steps, have a look in the mirror, bend it underneath us a little bit, walk 6 steps, go back and look in the mirror and go, oh, yep, they feel all right. We buy the shoe. So there are 4 very simple rules that can dictate if a shoe is good for feet. Then we've got to go work specific, sport specific, running specific, and think, what else do we need? Do we need cushioning?
Just on the testing there then. So how should we be feeling as a response from a trainer for us to think this is the right running shoe? So say we're in our runner's needs and we've tried all the different ones. Like how should we know that this is the one?
It's comfortable. So it ticks those first 3 boxes and you put a shoe on, it just feels right. We buy with our eyes more than we buy with our instincts of, it'll stretch, we'll mold it, it'll break in. We shouldn't be breaking in shoes. Like if we're going to break a shoe in, really the shoe's breaking you in. It's giving you blisters till your feet toughen up enough. So it should feel right. Like nothing more fancy than that is that when you put that shoe on, if it passes those first three, criteria, you put it on, it just doesn't feel right. Okay, great. You put another one on, it just feels right. Fantastic. Now we're still making a very educated guess. That's the best we've got with shoes. Even if we go for the same model in a shoe, a newer model to last year, it's the actual same model, things have changed. They're never the exact same. And so, we stick with the same model because it's a tried and trusted. I mean, I can tell you people that are on ASICS Kayano 28, and they've been there since, the 7, and they just keep buying it. But every year the shoe's very different. So some years they have good years where the shoe feels great, but they just stick with the same shoe because that's their shoe. So yeah, on the feel thing, it is really, if it doesn't feel right, it's not right. I can't tell you any different. I can't tell you it is right.
And are there any shortcuts would you say there are some brands that never have boxy toes and some brands that always have pinched toes, for example?
I will say that many of the big brands have gone through phases of being appalling and stiletto-like with the toes. And then in other years, they've been okay. But it's very, very rare to find shoes that are truly wide enough for the toes. Ultra is one brand that all of their shoes are very, very wide at the toes. And people put them on and they say, oh, they look so weird. They're so big. And it's just because it's different. So Ultra's one. Topo Athletic is one that their shoes as well, quite wide at the toes, quite foot-shaped. You've got the Vibram 5 fingers that I'm not a massive fan. I mean, I mowed the lawn in them for 8 years. I've bought them, tested them, and mowed the lawn in them. I'm not a huge fan of running barefoot. Now, what I mean by that is that very few people have strong enough feet to walk around the day barefoot. So running barefoot is so far beyond them from a conditioning point of view. I'm a huge fan of barefoot living. What I mean by that is building strong, healthy feet to live, to be around the house, the office, the backyard, to go to the beach, to live with not needing shoes. Now, with running, is that running in minimalist shoes is fine, but as you build mile after mile on the road, is that quite often, for the majority of us, having a little bit of cushioning is good. Some people like more than others. I will say that there comes a line where the more cushioning you have, the more you actually lose some of that mechanical spring that you've got. Like if you think of running on soft sand compared to hard sand. But that comes down not to just bulk of cushioning, it's the density of the cushioning. So there's so many variables in cushioning is that I don't sit here and say cushioning's bad, but if you need cushioning to get out of bed and just walk around your house, for me, there's massive warning signs there that those feet underneath you should be well equipped to carry you around just day-to-day living and not need shoes. Now, I will go, as a human, we need shoes for protection from really hot, really cold, really sharp, and hygiene. In my opinion, there are 4 needs for shoes. We need to protect our feet from 3 big things: hot, cold, sharp. But then for hygiene reasons, there's many places I am not walking barefoot, just from a hygiene point of view. But there's many other places I will. I mean, I quite commonly would take my shoes for a walk. I'd hold them in my hand, take them for a walk to pick my girls up from school. But there's a couple of areas where there's just lots and lots of bindies. Or there's an area that's just, littered with glass. I can put my shoes on for a little while.
What are bindies?
Little, I don't even know what you call them over there. Little things that stick in your feet from the grass. They happen around springtime.
Yeah. I know what you mean, but I don't know what they're called either.
Yeah. So in terms of, shortcuts, one of the biggest questions I ask is, what shoes are you wearing to work? And it stumps people at first, but if you think about the common job, including travel, being in a pair of shoes for 50 to 60 hours a week from the time you put them on to the time you take them off daily, you're wearing a pair of shoes for 50 to 60 hours, but you're more worried about those running shoes you wear for 4 hours or 3 hours a week. A lot of the damage to feet is done in the work shoes. And so work, depending on what the job is, can actually cause a lot of problems with feet just because of the amount of time that you spend in the shoes, school shoes as well. Or if you have the luxury, you can use work to strengthen feet.
When I listen to the original podcast with the guys that's running, I think that point on its own struck me as just so much common sense. Simply because, the focus on, whenever we talk about barefoot running, we focus, like you say, on the the 5 or 6 or 7 hours of running that you do, and thinking that that's where you have to actually transition. And really, just your entire lifestyle sets out. I had a problem with my hips for a long, long time, which I thought was a running problem. And of course, like they say, the 4 or 5 hours that I spent running, nothing to do with my hips. It was my lats from using a laptop. But it took ages for someone to come to the conclusion that actually it's what you do outside of the running that's actually affecting it. It's actually the amount of time. So essentially what you're saying is that you don't even need to change the shoes that you run in. You don't necessarily need to spend time to transitioning to changing your shoe. It's just simply by making the change in your lifestyle and how you wear shoes around the house and how you wear shoes at work. Actually, that will solve or start helping repair many of the problems.
Yeah, so you can't just change a pair of shoes and things are fixed. Now, let's just go way, way, way back to kids. Kids' feet are great. Kids' feet are awesome. They're natural.
You've made me worry about my kids' feet, though. That's the thing. So now, as soon as I got listened to that podcast, I got off and was like looking at my kids' shoes. I was like, God. Because my son...
Take them off! Get them off!
But he's exactly that. When you mentioned, children, they're perfect. Like my 6-year-old, he can squat perfectly. He runs perfectly. It's just the function is there. My daughter, who's 10, she's lost some of that already. And he was just like, what? How has that happened? And she's in these tight little shoes that, fit in for school, that in size of and so immediately it just makes you worry.
And she's also been sitting on chairs for 4 years longer than your son, which is a large percentage of life.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, it is hard because we can't change entirely the world that we live in. But looking at the shoes that our kids wear is that my job as a father, my job as a podiatrist, is that if something is fantastic, if something in its natural state is brilliant, my job's not to ruin it. That's my job. Don't ruin it. Don't screw it up. And so to the best of my ability is trying to keep my kids in shoes that allow their feet to do their job. That's fantastic. Now, I can't control that forever. I have 3 daughters. I'm sure they'll wear high heels at different times of their life, and that's fine. But if they choose to wear high heels sparingly because their feet don't like them, then that's great. But I can't say how that will be in 5, 10, 20 years' time. So, yeah, we're looking at kids' feet. Kids' feet are great. Now, all of us, our feet are deconditioned. They're not ruined. They're not broken. They're deconditioned. They're deconditioned to walk in barefoot. They're deconditioned to walk in on different terrain. Our feet hurt when we walk on concrete barefoot. Kids don't care. Their feet are conditioned to it. That doesn't bother them. So if we want to go backwards and we want to run barefoot, we've got a lot of work to do. That's not wrong. We've just got a lot of work to do. Whereas if we want to... Would you say...
Because half the challenge is you've got things like Vivo, which are pretty expensive shoes. Like, are there any brands out there that are good that don't make you look like a dickhead, in essence? Because that's a challenge, isn't it?
I don't even do any chairs of Vivo barefoot. I have, so thanks. I have so many models of Vivo barefoot. My kids wear them to school every day, so we're a family of dickheads. So.
No. I'm saying that those ones they're nice, but they're expensive, and for a lot of people, they don't want to spend £120 on a pair of shoes that just for the minimalism. In theory, you'd think they'd be cheaper because there's less of them, right? So, are there any good alternative, kind of more affordable brands?
Look, a little trick on that one is if they do have an inlay that comes out of the shoes that so many do. Take the inlay out of the shoe and stick your foot on it. Now, if your toes are hanging way over the edges, in the shoe they're going to be squished in. So simple little thing, you just take the inner out of the shoe, put your foot on it and see. But yeah, if a shoe ticks those 4 boxes, it can't be that bad. And then the question is that I always ask is, what do you want to do in the shoe? And then someone says, I'm climbing Mount Everest. It's like, oh shit, hang on, let's backtrack a little bit. We might need, we'd love to tick those those 4 boxes, but now we have something very specific in terms of a task that they're going to undertake in that shoe that makes it different. And that's the same as running shoes. That's where I don't draw a hard line as much as I used to on cushioning, because for the most part that the road will win, the concrete will win. But more often than not for us, not everybody, but more often than not, the road will win. We will fatigue and we will get a bit sloppy with our running, and we will keep running. And we will keep doing thousands of repetitions, which I call steps, thousands of repetitions in that run, sloppy. And so if we have a bit of cushion in the shoe to help lessen that impact, not entirely negative. Now, in a perfect world, when your technique fails with running, you should stop and walk. I mean, that's what you should do when your technique's failing with your deadlift or your squat. You know, instead of, you know, caving your knees in, rounding your back and looking like you're hunched in the fetal position squatting, is that if you're getting fatigued and you can't maintain good technique, you really should re-rack, rest, drop the weight, or rest and go again. And that's where we gauge our repetitions with a squat. How many squats can I do at that weight with pretty good technique to build my strength? And, you know, what's the aim of the session? All right, I'll keep it a bit lighter, I'll go a bit heavier. Whereas with running, we're going to run thousands of steps, so thousands of repetitions, almost no matter how we do it. We're going to get from A to B. We're going to do it. And that's where the technique thing comes in, is that we're going to get from A to B. But how we get there, it's a choice. We can do it sloppy. We can ground our knees to dust, running heavy and funky. Or if we can sit there and invest a bit of time into learning, maybe doing some drills, backing off a little bit to run well, is that we can have better technique.
And so then because most people, the issue is the calves when they try and switch to, barefoot, which isn't necessarily what we're saying. But so what type of drills is it that people should be doing? And are we just saying that like forefoot barefoot striking is the only way, or is there a way of not having to completely retrain how you run?
Okay, Dave, what part of your foot does your 6-year-old run on?
He runs on, I think he runs on the front of his foot, yeah.
You sure?
Yeah, I'd imagine the front, yeah.
No, it's really difficult to know. I haven't really watched him, like what he's doing with his feet. I've just watched him, the fact he kind of like leans forward, and it looks absolutely frightening because the speed he goes.
Yeah. Now, what kids run on is their feet. They don't run on their forefoot, their midfoot, their rear foot. They run on their feet. They got 33 joints. They run on the foot. Now, if you're running uphill compared to downhill, your foot's going to contact on a different part of your foot. If you're running on a camber, sloping the road this way compared to that way, your foot's going to contact in a different part. If you're running slow compared to fast, your foot's going to contact with a slightly different part of the foot. So when you focus on foot strike, you don't fix running. So whether you're a heel striker, midfoot striker, forefoot striker, like if you are one of those, like try striking on the exact same part of the foot for a whole run, and you're going to come out with problems somewhere. Could be the calves, could be the Achilles, could be your shins, could be anything, could be metatarsals. And the reason is that we have those 33 joints in the foot to be adaptable. We're not running on flat ground in a straight line very often. Running uphills, downhills, again, cambers in the road. So the part of your foot that contacts the ground first when you run should change. And that is the problem with the debate on which part of your foot you should run on, what your foot strike should be. It's the one thing I never, ever teach anybody with running. I never teach people which part of the foot to run on. Because if you get people running with good movement patterns, the part of the foot that contacts the ground first will be correct. Which part is it? It's going to change. And if we watch kids, they run on their feet. They don't run on their toes. They don't run on the balls of the feet. They run on their feet. And if you can slow them down and see the foot as it moves, the whole foot will be in touch with the ground at different times. But different parts of the foot, you get them changing direction. You get them just running around, chasing a soccer ball around, and you watch those little feet. If you get a slow motion camera, it's just incredible. So
I tried to do that, and
yeah, you got in trouble.
the police were not happy.
The thing is, when you made the point about your foot striking that many times, it did scare me, because I was thinking, all right, I don't know if I should go out running again until I've got this fixed, simply because obviously I have some issues. We've both got issues with our feet, and we don't want to continue making the same mistake, and so it's difficult to know where to start. I just want to take it slightly back and just. When you were talking about when the foot is stiff, it causes problems up the rest of the chain. What normally happens first? Do your feet become stiff first and then it causes problems, or is it problems further up the chain that cause your feet to become stiff, or does it completely depend?
Chicken and egg.
Right.
And egg. So there is no chicken or egg. By the time all of us probably listening to this, all of us in this conversation, people come and see me in the clinic, it's chicken and egg. It's not one thing causing the other. They're all affecting, they're all bouncing off each other. And you've just got to sit there and work out, right, for me as a practitioner, where do I start with this person? What can I help with today? And what can I build towards to help with, down the line? So it's not one or the other, definitely not. They all affect each other. What's happening around the hips, what's happening around the feet and ankles, it's up and down the chain, your lats, as you found out with your hips. It's all connected, and it's just it's a puzzle, and we're trying to pull apart this puzzle and then put it back together where things actually work a little bit better. Now, if we talk about walking, and I look at people walk all day, every day, part of my job is that I work from the feet up. When I'm watching someone walk, I'm working from the feet up, and I'm observing. So one of the big things I'll teach, my junior podiatrists or when I do workshops, are that don't try and diagnose. When you watch someone walk, when you watch someone run, don't diagnose, just observe. And there's a big difference between those, because at university we're very much taught to, again, analyze the anatomy, analyze the alignment, and just write everything down. If one earlobe's higher than the other, just all these things aren't right. And then when you try and work out what the hell's wrong, it's like, I don't even know how this person's walking. Like I've got a list of 400 things that weren't right with them. So observing, now this takes time, but observing rather than diagnosing. But when I work with running, it's the opposite. Start with the head and work down. So with walking, I work from the feet up. I might just tell someone with walking, I might tell them to walk quietly. Sit there and say, hey, stop hurting my floor. They're like, oh, what? And I'm like, you're walking so heavy.
Quietly, but I'm always working on how.
Something buzzing in the background there. But I'll tell them to walk quietly. And because as they're walking, I'm seeing this jarring go through their knees. So I'm making them aware of it. And I say, oh, yeah, I'm a heavy walker. My husband and wife tells me all the time I'm a heavy walker. And I say, don't be. And, for walking, a lot of what I do is from the feet up. With running, from the head down. The reason for that is that, for me, the head, when we run, guides posture. For me, our entire running posture is influenced by the head position. Where does our head go when we're tired, when we run? Where do people start looking? Down. Now, when our head drops as we get tired when we run, we get a bit shorter. So we're losing the tension in our core. We're losing the strength in our core. We're compressing our lungs. Diaphragm doesn't work as well. Our glutes don't work as well. So the simple thing of our head leaning forward when we get tired. What about when we go uphill? Some people are looking between their bloody legs, their head's that far leaning forward. So the first thing I work on with running is posture. And if we keep that head nice and tall, so keep that, I call it the bowling ball, keep the bowling ball on the shoulders, or some people prefer the puppet, nice and tall, being pulled from the top of the head. If we keep nice and tall from the head, great. Our lungs are in a better position to get that oxygen that we desperately need for running. Our trunk, our core, our glutes are all in a position they can work just by keeping your head on your shoulders. But again, as soon as we get tired, people drop their head. Now, the reason I focus on the head and not the feet is the feet are contacting the ground a hell of a lot. Crazy amount of times. We'll talk about cadence in a little bit. Crazy amount of times per minute. The head's technically not doing anything. It doesn't hit the ground, hopefully. mean, you might see those scars up on my head here. That wasn't running. That was a paddleboard injury last week. But the head doesn't hit the ground. The head technically doesn't need to move anywhere. And so if you can keep your head on your shoulders and stay nice and tall, there we go. We've got posture taken care of. Fantastic.
And how does that slot in with, because I've always been led to believe, or particularly if you're looking at increasing cadence, to lean forward.
Have you ever seen someone fall backwards when they run?
No, but I've rarely seen them fall forwards either, unless they trip.
Yes. So the conscious lean, for me, doesn't need to be taught. You know, every now and then you'll get someone that's got to sway back and arch back or something like that you're going to try and change their position, their alignment. But every time I ask people to lean, they bend at the hips. Now, when you bend at the hips, your glutes don't work very well. So we don't want to bend at the hips. We want to be in a nice straight line. So I want people tall. Now, tall and perpendicular to the ground are not the same thing. When we run, we're not going to be perpendicular to the ground. Otherwise, we're definitely going to fall backwards down a hill. Okay? So when we run, we want to be tall off the ground, but it's going to be ideally a straight line from your ankle through the top of your head. So telling people to lean, for me, they just lean at the hips. And you say, no, lean from the ankles. And they'd repeat the movement and bend at the hips. So I want people to be tall, because if you're going to run faster, your body will lean more. If you're going to run faster, it will lean more. If you're going to run slower, it will be more closer to vertical. So we want to be tall. That doesn't mean perpendicular to the ground. So leaning more, I used it at first because it was one of the things I was taught, and then I threw it out because it actually didn't achieve the job I wanted. It had people folding in half at the hips. And if they stay nice and tall, we get so much more benefit from their posture. Again, when I say tall, I don't mean perpendicular to the ground. That's very, very different. So we want to see this. I mean, if you watch a sprinter out of the blocks, they are tall. They are not tall off the ground, but they are in a straight line of drive and power from the back of their heel, basically through their head.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I interrupt your flow there.
Never.
So does that? So by like, I mean, is that a case? What it is? You're basically you're reducing the variables until you can kind of see what is going wrong until you get
absolutely nailed it. Absolutely. No, we want the least amount of cues to achieve the biggest results, and then we want to fine tune. But fixing from the top down for me. So we've got run tall, run quiet. But then when we get technical is I've got posture, which is the head. Second thing I go after is tension. So many of us when we run carry so much tension through the body. And it starts with me with the traps. So many people are so tense up through their traps, and we'll call it the shoulders. You know, your shoulders too tense, your shoulders are too high. But if we relax the traps, then we can get a little bit of equilibrium. We can get a little bit of, I call it Newton's 5 balls, where we're just dunk, dunk. It can start to flow a little bit more. Now, if we're tense up in the traps, we're tighter through the lungs. So again, the capacity to take in oxygen is reduced just by that tension. When we get tired, we get more tense. When we get tired, our head drops. So you can see how this all feeds into the fatigue. The fatigue is that we end up in positions that are a disadvantage to us running, and then there's just no way out. It's why running a technique just gets worse and worse. So the cues that I want people to have when they run, I always work with a maximum 3. Sometimes I sneak in a little extra one, but I try and say that they're tied in with another one, because I don't want people thinking about 10 things when they run. When they're fatigued, I want them thinking about 1 or 2 things that just get tall. Well, now instantly they can get more oxygen. That doesn't mean they feel great yet, but they've just instantly put their lungs in a position they can take more in. So we've got posture, which is head. We've got tension, which for me starts in the traps. And then I'll be looking at what their arms are doing. And sometimes their arms are, working fine. Other times they're waving to the crowd, like every step with their right arm. And I'll be like, who are you waving to? They'll be like, oh yeah, my right arm does some weird thing. And I'm like, don't. Because that's repeated thousands of times as you're running. So posture and tension are the first 2 things I go after when I'm working with someone one-on-one or in a small group. The third thing I go after is elasticity. Now this this is cadence. But elasticity for me is energy return per step. It's the smooth runner that you look at just float past you. It's the one that make things look easy. Even, you watch Kipchoge run, it's was it 17.08 seconds per 100 meters when he ran the marathon in under 2 hours. Like, I can run 17 seconds for 100 meters, no dramas. He did it 420 times with change. It's just mind blowing. So, but when you watch him run, it looks smooth, it looks effortless. Yet he's running it, he's sprinting. He's sprinting for just under 2 hours. So elasticity is the final piece I go after, and that's what for me brings most of the things back together. So if we keep that head on the shoulders, that bowling ball, we've got posture. If we can reduce tension up through the traps, upper body, great. Now we're a bit more relaxed. Fantastic. The final piece is elasticity. And the big thing about cadence is a number. It's a measurement, just like body weight. And it's not that we all need to run at the exact same cadence. But you are either elastic when you're running, and I'm talking about your calf, Achilles through your arch. So you're either elastic or you're not. And for me, that's black and white, is that you are either in the elastic zone of cadence or you're not. And if we jump up and down 10 times and stop and just go dunk, 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 it takes a lot of energy. If we go back to that skipping rope scenario and we've just got those very, very light, springy feet, barely any energy, and it's like, oh, wow, I could do this for ages. Because when you're jumping up and down slowly, it's stop, stop, stop. So you got to stop and start all the time. That's why I call it elasticity, because cadence is a number and people get a bit caught up with being told they've got to run 180 cadence. So they're looking at their watch, it's 155 and they run faster, 165, and they keep building. They get to that 180 and they're basically sprinting and they're dead. Cadence and speed are not the same thing. When I say that to a client, to a patient, I will run around them so slow at about 175, 180 cadence, and I'll sit there and show them how elastic I am in terms of just these little feet, barely any effort at all. I'm not going to win any races doing that, but I'm elastic. So cadence and speed are not the same. And when you run elastic, there is a hell of a lot of energy return that comes from load and spring through the body. It's what shoes aim to help us do as well, but a lot of their technology is. But we've got so much of it built into the body. Now that is what your 6-year-old does, Dave. That is what toddlers do, is that they've got these little feet that dunk, 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 dunk. You say it looks like they might fall over, but the feet are always there underneath them, like being on a hamster wheel. It's just these little feet. And that's why I threw it out at you, which part of their foot hits the ground first. It doesn't matter. They don't think of that. It's that elasticity, which cadence is the number. And it just so happens that you can't make your muscles, tendons, fascia, can't make them elastic at a very low cadence. You can't do it. You can make yourself more efficient. Don't get me wrong. You can have people shuffling along at quite a low cadence with minimal impact on their body, and that's fine. But if you are running where you've got a proper flight where both feet are off the ground, you can't make your tissue elastic at a very low cadence. I struggle to see people truly elastic below about 160 and often about 165 is where, for me, people get into that true elastic zone where they have true energy return as they're running. And a number I use a lot when I'm working as a general is 175. And I find a lot of people cope well with that, because when I work running with them, I work them at different speeds. So in these sessions I do, we work on about 40 meters because it's a technique session. I have them run at a comfortable pace. Now, a lot of people, when they run, because they're fresh, I haven't made them run 20 Ks before this. When they run at a comfortable pace, they look fine. A few little things, yeah, we'll sort them out. But when you make them run slowly, so I get them to run really slow on their way back to me, that's when I see all the faults that they have when they're tired. Because when do people run slow? When they're tired, when they're fatigued. Now, I only work this out through just trial and error and maybe good luck, but is that I get people to run really slow, because if I can teach them to run really efficient when they're slow, that's a massive tool to have in their toolkit, because when they're tired, when they're going uphill, when they've reached the top of a hill, when it's hot, is that if they can run, they're running slow, if they can run efficient when they're running slow. This is not perfect. This is not saying everyone has to be the same, but elasticity is a huge piece of that puzzle, and it's not speed.
So basically, this is really what it kind of comes down to. All of those things that you talked about, like landing heavy and having that elasticity. Can we refine that? Can we build that again? Or because when I spoke to the podiatrist, it made it sound as though a lot of that function I have lost forever. And I'm never going to get any of that back unless, of course, I get the orthotic, which is going to take over. The idea that that's incredibly encouraging. But it is possible to get all of the same function back in the same way, just through doing drills and changing your kind of like what you're wearing during the majority of your day.
Without being too negative, you will never have the feet that your 6-year-old has.
Right.
Unless you can just completely change your life, live somewhere different where you can be completely barefoot for the majority of your life, where you don't have chairs, it's not going to be like that. So we are not going to have the world's strongest feet. We need to go out and find tribes who are still living, abs tribes and hunting, gathering, and we can see some amazing feet. They still make themselves shoes. Again, they're still got to protect themselves from sharp, hot and cold, for the most part. They adapt to a lot of that, depending on where they live. But we're not going to have feet that we would if we never wore shoes. No, that's not going to happen. We can't get that. But in terms of running technique and getting that pure, smooth, efficient, effortless running that we see kids have, yes, we can. But we got to invest time into it. We got to pull it back a notch to sit there and train it. And just like if you want a good deadlift or a good squat or a good anything, you want to, do something in gymnastics, you got to break it down into the components and you got to build. That's one of the reasons I say that it's not about barefoot running for me. It's about having strong, healthy feet to run with. But then what is running? Well, it's a movement, it's a pattern. Well, great, let's train the pattern. So in terms of cadence for me is not about deconditioning. Cadence for me is not about the fact we've worn shoes. It's just that it's a skill that we've worked away from. And so if we can retrain that elasticity, but it's not about looking at your watch while you run and just running faster. It's about actually learning what cadence is. And that's why I use the word elasticity. And that's why I do it at very slow speeds. Because if you can run efficiently when you're slow, then we can build up from there. If you can squat an empty barbell really well, we can add weight from there.
Does that mean?
Oh, sorry.
Does that mean when you're running slowly, you should still be doing 180 cadence?
180, 175, 170, 184. Again, it's not an exact number, but there is an elastic zone. Now, on the upward end, there comes a point where like your son, Dave, it's going to get to a point where we feel like we're going to fall over in terms of how many times can we turn those feet over in a minute as the measurement. But, doing a really fast interval is that getting over a 200 or 210 cadence is entirely achievable. I've got little legs and it's just little legs going along. Not sustainable over a long period. So cadence is not an exact number. It's the elasticity that cadence implies. Again, cadence is just a measurement, but the elasticity is what we want. And it just so happens that around 160 to 165, our calf muscles, and there's 5 muscles in the back of the leg there, our tendons, our fascia, our arch muscles, they all become elastic at about that. Now, if I have someone jumping rope, and I call it bunny hops, and so we don't even have a skipping rope, we're just up and down with the feet, toes and balls of the feet come off the ground just a smidge, heels touch the ground ever so light, but it's just effortless. We put a metronome to that, to any human who is doing that. It just happens to be somewhere in the 170s. And if you slow them down to 150, it becomes a lot labored. They're in this in-between zone where they're not clunky, as in stop-start, but they're not elastic. And that elasticity in terms of, again, what we've got in our anatomy, taking that into run-ins, it's almost cheating. accept that it's how we're born, and it's completely free. And notice I haven't once said to run on your toes or the balls of your feet to achieve this.
Yeah.
Practicing cadence, because again, you want to have an efficient cadence going uphill. Take that word efficient out. You want to have an elastic cadence going uphill. You want to have an elastic cadence at the start of a run, at the end of a run, the top of a hill. Being elastic, which is not fast, can be slow. Having that is a massive skill. So again, I go from head down, posture with the head, tension with the traps, and then elasticity. Is there anything left to fix? Sometimes.
And is it worth, because I at some point, about 8 years ago, when I was looking at my marathon PBs and stuff like that, I put together playlists that were purely 180 cadence. Just went out running, and it turned out that actually I was naturally running at that cadence anyway, but I don't know if that's true when I was slower. So is it worth people also adding on, not loud music, so you can still hear your feet, but adding in that rhythm to actually give them a reference of what it is they're aiming for?
Definitely. If someone that likes to listen to music when they run, there's plenty of good apps out there, and you can sit there and just Google and get yourself a playlist, and it can certainly help. I work purely with a metronome, not while running. I'm not a big fan of people looking at their cadence when they run. I don't want anyone looking at the cadence while they run. I actually want them to feel elastic, because if you can't feel it, is that then you're constantly looking at your watch, your heart rate's spiking, and you've got that tension back again through your traps. So I want people to train it, and I do it with a metronome, either just a little device or an app on the phone. I have them working through the same 40 meters that we're working at in the session we did. And I get them to do in their warm up, their cool down, or after their squatting session or whatever else. And I say, hey, you work through this, and work through this to the point where it just starts to feel natural. Now, my goal when I work with them in that session is to have it look efficient, to have it look elastic. They need to feel it. And that might happen a smidge in that session, but it's not automatic, not normal. They'll default back to whatever their previous habits were if they go for another 5K run. But if they can slowly build that elasticity to feel normal, because if you, when you're running, feel elastic, you don't have to chase a magic number on your watch. You don't have to change anything. It might be that you find you have too much tension in your wrists or your ankles, or your head drops forward. You're one of those people. We find those habits, those inefficiencies, and we sit there and have the cues that when you're tired, you can call upon to bring them back. So music alone for me is a good tool, but I really want people to feel elastic, and that I love looking at numbers when I finish a run. Now, I'm not talking about pacing. I think pacing is very important, depending on the aim of your run, to look at your watch. But I love looking at numbers afterwards. I'm a geek at heart. I want to sit there and look. I'm like, 183, 178, 184. And it's my numbers with my little legs. I tend to be about 183, 180. That's just what I tend to be on any long run. I come back and I look, I'm like, shit, about the same again.
But it sounds like it's the last few miles of long runs or of races that you should actually be concentrating on, because that's the reflection of when you're tired.
Well, for some people, that's kilometer 1 through 10. And
True.
Other people, it's kilometer 8 through 10.
Yeah.
That's my point of when I call the amount of steps we take running repetitions, I try and get people to think, what would you do in a gym? If we were going to do 1,000 squats, you'd be like, really? Today? And you think, oh gosh, you're going to think about how you're going to do them. You're going to mix it up a little bit, try and have some variety, probably have no weight. But you're going to think about them. Even if we're doing, 5x5 with squats, we've got a couple of warm-up sets, and then we're going to increase the weight. And really the fourth and fifth sets are going to be quite heavy with the squats. Is you're thinking about your technique, you're making little adjustments. Even on your fourth rep, you felt a bit sloppy. So you use the cues that hopefully you've been taught, which maybe not, but hopefully you've been taught. You use those cues to tighten it up and get that fifth rep as good as you can. But with running, if someone runs, we'll call it 3 miles. Okay, I forgot you guys are a bit mixed up with your imperial and your metric over there. You do a little bit of both. Someone's running 3 miles and, literally half a mile into it, it's just sloppy and awful. They'll still run the other 2.5 miles.
Yeah.
They'll do it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's for me, it's about how many steps you take as the repetitions are positive repetitions and how many are negative. Positive for me are tall, relaxed, and elastic. Negative are heavy and clunky. And the aim of any run for me should be to have as many positive repetitions as you can. And if you literally are at a point where you cannot run tall, relaxed, and elastic, really, if we're in a gym doing that, we should rest. So the whole run walk thing for me has become so much more important. It does help that I'm rebuilding people from injury a lot of the time, but that perfect repetitions, the concept is about when you go out for this run, and I'll give them a time limit because these are recovering from injury. I'll say today, you got 2 20-minute runs this week. And in that 20 minutes, you accumulate as many core, relaxed, elastic repetitions as you can. Oh, so do I run for a minute or do I run for 400 meters? I don't care. You can run for 20 minutes if you can maintain that technique. But when you can't maintain that technique, depending on what injury they've got, I'll say now you walk for 60 seconds. Don't stop, just walk and go again. Now, how much running to walking there is dictated by technique, not by me trying to pretend I know exactly how many meters they can run on as they're recovering from an injury.
And for people then, because... Oh, go ahead, Jody.
I was going to say that we've kind of like talked there about, running technique and everything like that. I think, a lot of people will, when they're trying to kind of deal with this, they're going to look to things like YouTube and online and other stuff like that. And a big focus on all of those things is around what you do with the feet in terms of stretching them, in terms of exercises about all, different things you do with your calf muscles, stuff like that. Is that built into? Is that something that should be built into the kind of like moving the foot from stiffness back to flexibility, or is it dangerous? Or the thing is, there's so many. You see half the things going. Here's how to fix flat feet. All completely different things. That the podiatrist telling me you can never fix flat feet. You should never do these things. There's just so much. What should people be doing in terms of like preparing their feet like before a run or after a run or all that period in between to kind of bring them back from that point of stiffness if it's possible?
So let's go back to shape of feet. If a foot is flat but is strong and coordinated, great foot. If a foot has a high arch that's weak and uncoordinated, terrible foot. So for me, shape doesn't tell me what the foot's doing. Just looking at shape. Now, there's a whole industry, 2 industries really. We've got the footwear, we've got the orthotic industry that's largely dictated by shape of foot.
Right.
But shape doesn't dictate what a foot does. Remember, there's 33 joints in that foot, regardless of whether it's flat, high, medium, or anything in between. So when I'm looking at a foot, if it's flat, how do I fix a flat foot? Like, I'm going to have to agree with a podiatrist. If it's flat, it's flat. Like if it is genetically flat, it's flat. Now, we also say that high arches can be bad too. The only way to fix that's like a sledgehammer, right? Sit there and change that. So shape of foot doesn't dictate what your foot will do. Now, it's an influence. As a podiatrist, I'm always looking at angles, shapes, how things are interacting. That's fine. But as a whole piece, there's 33 joints in there. What I want to know is, can those 33 joints work as a team, which is controlled by this thing, the brain. So that's where the coordination thing comes in. Okay, so balance and coordination with feet. Now, let's go another way. The joints in the feet need to move somewhat, but again, genetically, some people's feet are really mobile. Some people's feet are quite stiff, and this is our whole body structure. Some people are called hypermobile or ligamentous laxity. All elite gymnasts are, where they can contort joints into weird positions. Double jointed, we'd often call it. Thumbs can go all over the place. My thumb's never gone past there. It breaks if it goes past there. Others can push it into here without any dramas. That's genetic. Now, so if you've got mobile joints, if you've got stiff joints, that's great. We still need to work on what they can do better. Now, we can't say that an anatomical flat foot or high arch is right or wrong if that's what we are. I'm quite short. I know I'm sitting here, you can't see. It's not right or wrong, depending on who you ask. My friends might differ. But it's not right or wrong to be short. So the first thing with feet, we've got 33 joints in each foot. Do they work as a team? Now, the real controller of all that's the brain. But down there, we've got a really important part of the foot that is really the captain down there, or the chief down there, and that's your big toe. The reason your big toe is so big and that big knuckle joint behind it, it's designed to give you stability. It's designed to give you balance. It's designed to help you as you wind your foot up to make your arch tight to push off. Your plantar fascia that's in there, your big toe has a huge influence on using that plantar fascia to wind up your foot to push off, which then ties into your Achilles calf. So your arch, your Achilles and calf need to be one team. So I'm going to look at, well, how well are those pieces working together? Now, if your foot's not working very well and, you know, the coordination's terrible, we can talk about how to test this in a moment, it's all over the place. Well, which part of that team between calf, Achilles, and foot is going to work harder? Those calf muscles. They work harder, and they're great. They're workhorses. They'll keep going. But over time, if you're overworked and underpaid, those calf muscles, they get tighter and tighter and tighter. Now, we also can't mistake tightness for shortness. And there's a big difference here is that everyone gets told they got tight calves. We've got tight calves, so we try and stretch them. Now, when I talk about tightness in calves, I'm not talking about shortness of muscle. I'm talking about the fibers being like dreadlocks, the fibers being like beef jerky, like really tight and gritty instead of elastic. So we want a medium rare fillet steak. We want elastic muscles instead of tight and gritty. Now, it's very hard to stretch out beef jerky. Very hard if you've got knots in your hair, if we had long hair, to pull your hair and get rid of the knots. So stretching calves to get rid of that beef jerky, gritty tightness in the muscle fibers, it doesn't work. And that's why we all get told to stretch our calves, and we've all tried it and we still have problems and they're still tight. Okay? So short and tight, different. But we'll get told to stretch the tight muscles. Now, we do want to get back that elasticity in those muscle fibers. Now, how do we do that with hair? With a hairbrush, maybe a little bit of conditioner, fantastic. With muscles, we can do it with massage. Great. But then maybe the next run, they're back to being tight again. Well, why are they tight? Well, it could be something further up the chain. Could be your lats, could be your hips, could be wherever. It could be something further down like those feet. It could be the shoes. Now, the better the feet and calves work together, which is why all of my rehab has to be done barefoot, because we have to be able to sit there and work those two pieces together, the better they can work together. Well, now, if you've got strong, healthy feet that you're putting into your running shoes, you're putting Formula One machines into your shoes to go run. It's awesome. If we're trying to chase the damn shoe to fix the problem all the time, we're just running around in circles. So one of my first tests that I'll do is, first of all, I just have people stand up and I look at their just overall posture, just observing. But then I'll have them to stand strong and tall with feet together and then lift one foot off the ground. And you'll be amazed at how many people who run significant amounts of miles and kilometers per week cannot stand on one foot, cannot balance on one foot. And I look at them and say, shit, like, you run on those things? And they're like, and they had no idea that their balance was that poor. Now, if you can't stand on one foot, in my world, you're not even walking. You're just falling from foot to foot. Because if it can't hold you up standing, it sure as hell's not doing a great job underneath you as you're walking, and especially as you're running, landing with 2.5 times body weight and force through your feet. So if you can't stand on one foot and you've got problems with your running or you're getting injured, that's an issue. If you can't stand on one foot and you don't have problems with your running, it's still an issue. So if the coordination it takes through the whole body just to balance on one foot, you got the 33 joints in the foot, then you got all the other pieces up the chain that have to work as well. So it's a great little test. Feet close together, strong and tall, stand on one foot. Great, stand on the other one.
So should we then, because I've recently started doing Romanian, Bulgarian deadlifts. Should we be doing those barefoot?
100%. 100%. Can we come back to that in 2 seconds? The other big test, because I know you're going to ask me what we can do. One big test is stand on one foot. The next one is feet underneath the hips. I just get people to slowly come into a calf raise. And I watch what their big toe's doing. Now, if they're wobbling all over the place, like the big toe's literally drunk, moving all over the place. Now, if the big toe can't stabilize on the ground as they're doing a two-foot, double foot, slow calf raise, the big toe can't stabilize on the ground, I don't need my fancy force platform or anything else that I use to tell me it can't do it when they walk. It can't do it when they run. Chances are I'm going to see a huge amount of callus underneath their second, third, and fourth knuckle joints. Or I take out the inlay of their shoe and I see a huge depression underneath these little guys and nothing underneath here. So they're two things I'm looking at, checking out the feet. They're two things that I'm looking at just to give me a very global picture of what's happening underneath someone when they're walking and running.
And I mean, I was going to ask you a specific question, but I'll ask you at the end. So the issue we've and because can people who aren't, do you do sessions with people outside of the UK? Because we do, so outside of Australia, because we've got a lot of Australian listeners, but most of our listeners are all around the world. So will the issue, I think, particularly in the UK, but I imagine in most places on earth, people will face is that when they speak to a podiatrist, they're not a running podiatrist. And so their view, and I've heard this quoted back in some form or other, is they just need to get me back to be able to work without pain. And so that's completely different to be able to bury myself in weeks of training, which is what my preference is. So how do people, are we saying that there's almost no point in seeing normal podiatrists to get help with issues related to the things we've spoken about, or is there a way in which,
or is it better going to a running coach to fix your functional issues?
Or is there a way to navigate conversations with podiatrists so they actually acknowledge your awareness of what they're going to say and what you know to be different?
It's a great question. The reason I started teaching other practitioners what I do years ago was because I kept getting asked these questions, and who should I see here, and do you know anyone else, and do you do virtual consults? And I don't, because if I can't give someone everything I've got, and I can't do it online. Like during COVID, even during lockdown, we tried to do bits, but it's that I can't give them everything online when we're, no, move the camera a bit this way. Oh, no, do this. Just hard. So that's when I started teaching my workshops, because there are a lot of people who ask these questions as practitioners, as I did back in the day. I had to find people to sit there and mentor me, and I had to find online stuff. And people say, where'd you learn all this? And I'm kind of like, everywhere. Is that it's a constant when you start thinking this way, watching how kids move, all the rest of that. So it's this podiatry as a whole is about the feet and is about walking. But there's a huge part of podiatry which is also about looking after people with diabetes, making sure they don't get ulcers and amputations. And there's this whole huge scope of podiatry that is not my world now. And you don't want to see me for any of those problems because, I don't do that and haven't done it for a long time. So I don't want to knock the profession in any way, shape or form. I make orthotics, and there are many, many times when I do need to make an orthotic and I can help someone with an orthotic, whether it's for work, for running. I make my orthotics out of latex, which is as soft as your pillow and your mattress. And the idea is that if I can help someone's foot do its job, while in the background, we spend the time training the feet to do their own job, is that my orthotics I haven't worn for 8 years, but I needed them at the time because I didn't know any better and I didn't know how to do anything else. So an orthotic to help if an orthotic truly helps the foot do its job, it's not a negative. That's what we're buying in running shoes. Ideally, is a shoe that helps us do our job, especially when we're fatigued. But a stiff orthotic for me, barring exceptional circumstances of foot deformities and things like that, which is just another category, is a foot should move. 33 joints. So if an orthotic can't move, well, how's it going to help your foot do its job? Then we can argue, well, no, we're just trying to take stress off the tissue for it to heal. I mean, that's what a sling does, or a plaster cast. Yep, good. But they're all temporary, very temporary. And then we take them off and we do rehab. With orthotics for feet, unfortunately, is that most of the time the orthotic, as you've both been told, is no, you have to wear it in the shower to bed all the time. If you ever take it off, your feet will become flatter and die. It's that
It is that how it's sold, like, so aggressively, like your feet are getting worse unless you do this, they're going to get worse, and it's going to it's going to be awful. And the specific thing that you said there about it is that I said to the podiatrist I saw, I said, I have worn an orthotic before when I had plantar fasciitis, and I wore it for relief. And he's going, well, you know, that's shown you that orthotic works. And I said, but the point was, it was temporary. It was temporary to get me over that period of time, and then I could fix it. And it's really interesting to hear you say that about the temporary nature of orthotics, and that actually they can restore that function as long as you're doing that thing in the background.
Yeah. So, and you two are very, very motivated. You want your feet to work better. You want to achieve goals in life, and we don't have to be world record holders for that. We just want to be able to be healthy and able. There are many people who wear orthotics because it keeps them out of pain, and they will never get out of orthotics, and that's not negative. It depends on how much motivation you've got. Now, when I make an orthotic, I want to do just enough for that foot, I don't want to reinvent that foot. That's one of the big things that I worked out over the years, is that I don't need to reinvent a foot. I just need to help it. Because if I can help it do its job, again, these feet are taking thousands of steps on any given day. They don't get a rest. Why foot injuries is such a pain in the backside, because we don't truly rest them, no matter what we do. So orthotics are not a negative thing. It's that both of you were seeking more and you didn't get it. Yeah. A lot of my clients come into the same thing. They've been around the merry-go-round. If they saw me 15 years ago, they would have got possibly similar to what you guys got. And they come to me seeking more. So there are a lot of podiatrists out there who do offer this, or need guidance on how to do it, because at university even they're asking questions. I wasn't smart enough to ask these questions at university. I just had to use it for a while, and then after a while it didn't make sense. So these younger podiatrists that, you know, either end up working with me or coming to my workshops, they're fabulous because they're asking the questions long before I did. So yes, they are out there. I can't vouch for the UK. I can't vouch for, you know, much beyond what I know. But that's when I started teaching. That's when I started doing some online courses as well, just for general population. Is that I put more material out there over the years, just because people would say, well, can you help me? I'm like, I'm happy for you to fly me anywhere. You know, send me on a trip somewhere. I'll come back over to London.
Wait a minute. You said that you don't do virtual consults, don't you? Aren't you coaching Tia Claire Toomey?
What do you mean?
Is that
virtual about it?
Oh, is that not virtual? Is that are you flying out to her?
No. So I worked with Tia for 4 years.
Yeah.
And Tia's at the moment in Europe. She was in Latvia just recently, and she's pushing for a spot in the Winter Olympics in bobsleigh.
Really?
So she, I mean, phenomenal athlete. And so, yes, I worked with Tia, but I programmed her run-in. I helped prepare her for the CrossFit season and the CrossFit Games. And we would converse just as much as we need to. But she's a phenomenal athlete, always was before I got to her. Is that my biggest role with Tia was programming smart and structured to help her prepare for events at the CrossFit Games. And I can probably say this, that the goal was that running events had to be a sure thing. She was a good runner. And so the job was to make sure she was prepared, and that the points available for those running events were just, you had to take them. And, you know, anytime she won a running event, I breathed a sigh of relief and said, righto, good for a little while. But no, so we didn't need, that's not treatment. That's not virtual consults. It's, you know, barely even virtual coaching. It was, once we knew each other, it was quite easy to work with someone like that. But yeah, so she's trying for bobsled. She's been to the Summer Olympics for weightlifting. She's won a Commonwealth Games gold medal in weightlifting. One of my favorite sporting moments watching that. Now potentially Winter Olympics. Just a phenomenal athlete and a great human too.
We can't even do running right. But and do you, just thinking of, for the listener, do you have a list of practitioners who you've trained in different countries we could potentially share in the group, so that if anyone is looking for someone with a reflection of your knowledge locally, they could reach out to them?
I don't have a list. It's all been Australia and New Zealand at this stage. Any plans of venturing abroad has been, put on hold. Even I haven't done a practitioner workshop in nearly 2 years here. And, every time I plan a date and I've got people emailing me and saying, oh, when's the next one? It just gets hamstrung by COVID as with everything. So no, I don't. But look, it's not just me. There's plenty of people out there. They are hard to find. And if you've been, burnt a couple of times by seeking something and not getting it, it doesn't matter if it's physiotherapy, chiropractic, osteopathy, any profession there's stereotypes on all of them. And yes, podiatrists that we just make orthotics. And look, at university, I can't remember a single minute talking about running or learning or hearing about running in a lecture. Yet as soon as the day we graduate, we are seen as the experts in running shoes. We are seen as the experts in feet. And we are seen as the experts in telling you what running shoes you need, because that's what people want to know. They want to know what shoes they need for them to help them with their running, to help them not get injured, to actually just what do their feet need. And, when you don't spend a single minute on the mechanics of running, look, we probably spent a little bit, but not practically. Like we probably looked at some stick figures in terms of running, gait and things like that. But considering ourselves experts in whatever we trained at university, it's very rare to come out as an expert. It's just a perception we are. And, I'm not an expert in anything. I have a passion for certain things, and it's evolved over the time. I didn't plan any of this. I didn't plan to help people with running or to be on podcasts or to teach. It's just something that I always ask questions. And I say in my world, the best question you can ever ask is why. The annoying 3-year-old. Just keep asking why.
My podiatrist
and when the answers,
he didn't like that at
all. No, mine either. Yeah.
Don't be that person. But no, that's how I got here, is that when things didn't make sense, like if I couldn't answer the question of why, then I had to dig deeper. And then if there's another question of why, and it just kept going, and it still does to this very day. The final piece of the puzzle is spring. Now, spring can be a spring in the step for someone walking, simple as that. A spring can be running, coming back to that elasticity. Spring can be jumping. Feet are a part of that. Very hard to jump without feet. It's very hard to walk without feet. So balance and coordination, strength, spring. But it starts with that balance and coordination. If that's not there, like training the strength and spring just keeps running into brick walls. Now, let's go straight back to, before we forget again, should we be training in the gym barefoot? 100%. Every exercise we do on our feet without shoes is a foot exercise. We don't need to do arch curls, in the gym, just sitting there somehow doing some arch curls. There's different things you can do to wake up feet and get muscles in the arch working. But if your feet are underneath you when you're...
Can you name some of those, if people want to Google some of those exercises, if people do want to wake them up?
Let me think about the best way to get that. There is one very, very common one. It's not my favorite exercise. So put that on the chalkboard in just a second. But yeah, if you're deadlifting and your shoes are off, it's a foot exercise. If you're squatting and your shoes are off, it's a foot exercise. So having your feet off when you're doing burpees, if you're doing box jumps, if you're skipping, people say the rope might hurt. And I say that'll teach you to skip better. So when your shoes are off, you're working your feet. So instead of having this 20-minute foot program that you've got to do, you already spent 40 minutes in the gym. Now, let's just forget we've got to wear shoes in a gym for a moment. I'm just talking about ideal world. Just keep your shoes off. I mean, 99% of the work I do in a gym's barefoot, has been for probably 8 years now. And thankfully, my gym's, my garage has been for the last 2 years. But is that the gym I was in didn't care if I had shoes on or not. They knew if I was stupid enough to drop something on my foot, that a shoe wasn't going to help me anyway. So hygiene is one good reason I've heard to wear shoes in a gym. My argument was, right or wrong, the more I'm barefoot, the tougher my skin is, and it'll keep all that nasty crap out. I can't vouch for how true that is, but so far I've still got all my toes and no crazy fungus. But yeah, like every exercise you do in a gym, there are a couple of exceptions. When I'm on the rower, I like to have a shoe on because the stirrup actually just irritates the back of my heel. If I'm doing rope climbs, You know, I like to have a shoe on to sit there and help, particularly when coming down. Most other things, though, done barefoot, you're actually working your feet, you're doing your horrible burpees, take your shoes off. You're doing push-ups, take your shoes off. Like, aside from the fact gyms say we need shoes on, let's just talk about the global exercise, is that shoes off. Like, I see rehab online all the time. I see people doing rehab for knees, for hips, for any body part, and the shoes are always on. Take the shoes off.
And one thing I've had said to me by my my podiatrist, which I was in despair at and questioning, and then just shut down without answers, was I have a toe that my big toe's starting to go walkies, and they've said that there's nothing you can do to avoid bunions, and that it's just something that you have to, if it gets bad, then deal with the badness once the badness happens. Is that something that just through getting better shoes and doing these exercises barefoot, will that help issues like that, or is there something you can specifically? Because in my case, my big toe is starting to veer to the left, inwards to the foot. Like, are there specific things you can do to address stuff like that, or?
Look, the big toes are incredibly important. I've mentioned a couple of times, and they work really well, like your car tires. They work really well when they face where you're going. When your big toes start to head off yonder, off that way, they don't work as well. And so, yeah, we do lose a lot of our balance, strength, and stability when the big toes are heading that way, massively. That's why I'm so anti-shoes that pull the big toe across that position. Because if your shoes are constantly putting across there, eventually it's going to stay there. Now, there's a big thing with feet and shoes in the world saying that bunions are genetic. Now, to my knowledge, they haven't found a gene that, you know, at age 30, 40, 45, the big toe goes, shit, I've had a good time here, I'm going that way. There are factors that are genetic, like how mobile your joints are. So if you have very mobile, flexible joints, your big toe is more susceptible to getting stuck over in that position or drift in that position. And yes, once it starts to go that way, it is hard to bring it back, but it is not impossible. Now, if it's sitting way across there and your second toe's overlapping it like so, is that, yeah, it's not coming back without surgery. But it's not impossible to improve that big toe position. There are wedges that you can buy that go between your toe. We make them in the clinic. So we just use this little silicone with a catalyst. We mold it in between. So it sits between your big toe and your second toe, and it pushes your big toe a little bit straighter. Now, I use the word straighter with that ER on the end as opposed to straight, but it pushes it straighter. Now, the question is, how long before it'll stay there? Well, how many years did it take for it to go that way? It's not a quick fix, but every step you take with your big toe in a straighter position is a stronger step. Your big toe is pointing roughly straight ahead compared to over yonder, off to the outside of the foot, is that so when that wedge is in there, your big toe is just able to do its job. So every step you take with that wedge in is a stronger step for the body. So there's no negative there. But if people are wearing that wedge for a week or a month and sit there and go, oh, my big toes, when I take it off, it's still crooked. Well, of course it is. Because all of the soft tissue that once held here has been stretched over to here. That's its normal for you right now. Bringing it back to what was once normal can take a long time. And it's not just through exercises. You can do all the exercise with your foot under the sun, like for that big toe. When you run, when you walk, and you put all that force through your feet repeatedly, is that it'll still head back to that position because that's its new normal. So a wedge between them, magnificent. Wearing it to bed, look, just in my opinion, doesn't do a huge amount. Is that there's a lot of devices you can straighten your toe while you're sleeping. And then while you're walking, back over there.
And say you have a wedge though, is there an issue that potentially you could then be forcing the next toe into a position that it shouldn't be in and almost pushing everything else out?
If the shoes do not allow your big toe to be straight, that's what's going to happen. If you have no space, like your shoes, again, are triangles at the front, there's no point wedging something because it's just going to run into the side wall of the shoe. If the wedge is too thick, trying to make your toe like dead straight as opposed to straighter, is that yes, it can just push your second toe that way. Now, when I make this wedge in the clinic and we have it there, because sitting there, you're not standing on it, is that because the big toe is so strong, it will look like it's pushing the toes that way. But that's why we need the shoe, because the shoe on the outside here won't let those toes keep going that way, which is therefore what's going to help the big toe be straight. So if we take this rectangular shoe here, for instance, and if your big toe is sitting over here, we've got a lot of room to straighten it up. And if we sit there and put that wedge in, because the toes can't keep going that way because there's a shoe there, is we can straighten that toe up whilst you're wearing the wedge. Now, in that instance, it is that the wedge will work whilst you've got it on, and then when you take it off, your big toe will likely head back to where it was. But if you wear the wedge often enough, do some exercise, there's improvement that can be made. It is definitely one of those that I don't sit there and say, oh yeah, 100%, we can get that big toe straight. Give us a couple of months, or give us a year. There's a lot. It takes a long time for it to start to go that way. And again, all of the tissue around there is now used to being in that position. It doesn't just magically come back. Because it's such a strong, powerful structure, is that it's not easily influenced, for good or bad. It takes a long period of time. So, and then I work with 2 orthopedic surgeons now. It's been a change in my clinic in the last 18 months. And so I do a lot of rehab from surgery, another little arm that we've added to the podiatry side. And so when things are beyond that, we can't correct them, and whether that's through a ruptured Achilles tendon, whether that's through chronic Achilles tendinosis where the heel bone's just all jagged, is that after surgery, we now sit there and do the rehab, the same principles that we're talking about, get the joints moving, get the balance and coordination, the strength and the spring. And so we're following the same principles. So even if someone had surgery on that big toe, is that we're working on getting the function back the best we can. So without surgery, with surgery, it's always about how to improve what you own. Shoes are bought, orthotics are bought. What we own is our muscles, tendons, fascia, bones. We own those. So my first principle is always, what can we improve there? Knowing full well that sometimes that it's going to take a long time. Not everyone's going to be as motivated as you two there, for instance, or other listeners. And it's, people say, how long does it take? How long does it take to what? How long does it take for my feet to be strong? Well, depends what our parameter of strong is. My feet are stronger now than they were last year, and they're a hell of a lot stronger than they were 3-4 years ago. And once, coming back to these lifestyle changes, once you start thinking about, all right, what are my feet doing well, what aren't they? What can I improve? Then it is bringing that conditioning back in. So when can you walk around barefoot? Because just walking around barefoot is not going to fix your feet. If you can't balance on one foot, if your big toes don't know how to work underneath you, is that just walking barefoot, it won't magically come back. It's like doing more squats won't magically squat like a 6-year-old. But if you actually have the range of motion in those joints, or you can get it back, and you have the movement patterns and you drill it, and you make that normal again, we can get a lot back. But as I said before, to say we can have feet like a toddler, like I look at my kids' feet and they're amazing, they're awesome. My feet don't have to be that. My feet have also, suffered a lot of trauma from life, and all, as our bodies do. But what can I have better with my feet? Or for me, it is the squatting, the deadlifting, the swimming, the just other activities in life. What can be better?
One thing I found with feet, sorry, just to say, is it when you are like I've started to walk around on barefoot a lot more, just as a result of listening to the podcast, the one before, and just kind of getting into it. And I don't know, like with feet, it's really weird because you don't know whether whether the aching in your feet is because your feet is getting stronger or whether you're hurting yourself. Because you're just not used to having something that's not acute pain in your feet, like a general aching. How can you tell that you're getting stronger? Is it just a case of measuring where you were before, measuring where you are, and seeing like that? Is there any kind of feeling to your feet that is a good feeling and one that's a bad feeling?
My litmus test is, how do they feel when you get out of bed in the morning? So if you have achy feet during the day, if you have achy anything during the day, when you go to sleep, your body's job is to heal, repair, recover. If you get out of bed and your feet are sorer than yesterday, you've caused damage or trauma. Whereas if you get out of bed and your feet are fine, and then you use them through the day and they get achy again, if you get out of bed and they're not sore, if you get out of bed after a run and you're not sore, you feel quite fresh, is that your recovery is on point. So it's all about your recovery, same as running. Running's not about how many times you can run a week or should run a week or how many miles you should do. Because if you truly recover from run to run, you can run every day if you want. But if you want to run every day high mileage, your recovery is going to have to be really on point. And there's a lot involved with that, with sleep and nutrition and stress and basically movement. There's so many pieces of that puzzle. So if you get out of bed, they're no sorer than they were yesterday, or you've done no more damage. If you get out of bed and they're not sore, they're fine. So that's my sort of rule. Now, I've got a cricket oval that's just over this way, and it's not cold and wet, and thankfully we do have some good summers out here. When I get that first sprinting session on that carpet cricket field out there in sort of spring, is that I feel these ligaments. I feel muscles, but I feel these ligaments, this connective tissue that's just sore like that day and maybe even like that evening. In the morning, if I feel a little bit, I'm okay with that because I know that I just put stress through those, that even my minimalist trail shoes that I wear, so I wear Vivo Barefoot trail shoes on a grass track, which is a lot of my running these days, which don't offer a huge amount to my feet, but even taking them off, I can feel that connective tissue working harder. And I know it's there, and I know I haven't caused trauma or damage, and I know it's only going to be there for a day and then it's fine. And then if I do a second run and a third run, it doesn't present anymore. So yeah, it's kind of like your running, is that if things are getting worse, it's not helpful. It's not helpful. It's the gradual overload principle, a little bit of the time. Okay. And how do we measure that? For me, we measure it with how we get out of bed in the morning. How's it feel?
Pretty clear.
Amazing. Well, if people want to reach out to you locally, people that want to join your workshops, or people want to follow your education, what's the best way for them to do that?
There's a couple of avenues. So if they're local listeners anywhere sort of here in New South Wales and Australia, the Wollongong Foot and Ankle Centre is where the podiatry clinic is. That's where I work. That's where I am in person. That's where I do the running mechanics sessions out of as well. A lot of people will find me through the running lab, and you got to put the in front of it. Otherwise, you'll be at a shoe shop in Singapore, which is running lab. So the running lab, and that's where people tend to find more about the workshops, the running side of things. So it's either the running lab or Wollongong Foot and Ankle Centre. If they get my name off this, there's not too many of me in the world, so I'm pretty easy to find that way. I'm just thinking about the question you asked about exercises, because it really is a tricky one. Yes, I've got some online courses and stuff that people can purchase, which is great. But I spend a lot of time doing exercises with people standing on one foot. And some people will start with fingertips on the back of a chair or a desk to sit there and train that balance, that coordination, eventually to be standing there, and then to do it eyes closed. I get people to do it with eyes open with the heel just off the ground. There are a million variations of standing on one foot, but I find a lot of people are on wobble boards or balance mats, but they can't actually stand on one foot on the hard ground. So again, it's getting the foundations right first. And so running is a one-footed sport. Odd to say, but we're on one foot. We're never on 2 feet. So we're landing on one foot every single time. And so being able to stand on one foot, eyes open, great, eyes closed, challenging, but that's what feet should be able to do. The coordination between the feet and brain, it's literally nerve signals up and down. Throwing a ball, if you've got a wall, you can throw the ball at a wall and catch it. You stand on one foot. There's a million different ways there, but there's a huge amount of gain to be made in being able to have the balance and coordination to stand on one foot. And the other one I'll throw at you is called fives. This is about the big toe. Standing, so the test that I gave you before of standing on one leg and then doing that slow calf raise, they're virtually the exercises too, just with variations. Now, fives is standing with your feet underneath your hips, and you spend 5 seconds slowly lifting your heels up into a calf raise. Hold for 5 seconds. Lower for 5 seconds. 5 good reps. Called fives. I call it strong feet fives. 5 seconds up, 5 seconds hold, 5 seconds down. And the key is to keep your big toe strong on the ground. Because if your big toe moves, you'll find your ankles, your knees, everything moves all over the place. And so it's just training rephrase that, it's retraining the big toe to do its job. And that's a key point here, is that there's not a lot of things that I do where I'm having to teach someone a completely new skill. I'm really just teaching them something the body used to do naturally. So it's called retraining. And yes, a single leg standing with a million variations, any which way. But for me, if you can't stand on one leg strong and tall for 10 seconds, comfortably, easily, brush your teeth, we got a problem. That's the first thing we're going to work on. The fives exercise is about getting your big toes just to be that strong, dominant force. Because if it can't do it there, I know it's not going to do it out in the real world when you're 3Ks into a run. So the other exercise that I was sort of sheepish on, it's called short foot. And short foot is basically standing on, you start with 2 feet, but you can go to 1 foot, and you try and bring your ball of your foot towards your heel. You kind of make ball of the foot come towards the heel. It's tricky, it's awkward, it's hard to do, hard to teach. And just personally, I don't find it transitions well into other exercises or has huge bang for buck. Now, if an exercise is hard to do and hard to replicate when someone leaves my clinic room, it's a bad exercise.
Yeah.
I need things that they can do quickly. I need things that they can do while they're filling their car up with petrol. I need things they can do when they're brushing their teeth. And most of my exercises are challenges, as in pass fail. Can you stand on 1 foot for 10 seconds comfortably? And the other foot? Can you do it with eyes closed? Can you do the fives exercise comfortably? No? Great. Work on that. I'll see you in a week or 2 weeks or whatever it is. Because if you give people a 20-minute program, I've only got 18 minutes. I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, we're humans. Whereas if you say, hey, when you come and see me next time, you need to be able to do these 2 things. Now, layered on top of that, I might have some sort of massage for those calves. You know, whether it's a massage gun, whether it's a foam roller, whether it's I am a big fan of massage guns these days because they're everywhere, but everybody cranks them up to the highest setting, which is vibration, not massage. And, you know, human nature, 10 is better than 1. I just get people to keep it on the lower settings where you actually just, like peeling an onion, you can just start to loosen off those muscle fibers, those tight, not short, those tight muscle fibers in those calves. Because if you've got coordinated feet, strong coordinated feet, and healthy calves, what's going to hold you back in the lower limb? Strong coordinated feet and healthy calves being elastic. I didn't use the word strong. Like so many calves that I see are strong. They're just tight. They're like you stick your thumbs on them and they're like concrete, or you stick your thumbs on them and people punch you because it hurts because they're so tender. So it's often not a lack of strength in the calves. It's just they're just these balls of beef jerky.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and or helping us both personally, but also I think giving a real good overview into what's going wrong with everything for runners at the moment, and options for them to resolve that. And
you said you didn't do virtual consults, but I feel like we've had one. So.
yeah, absolutely.
It's our way of getting you on to do it.
Well, it's, you know, I can go up on tangents everywhere, and I'm like, I don't know if I answered any of your questions, but yeah, it's trying to provide some tools and, you know, some concepts to work with. Really, is that strong, healthy feet to run with.
Amazing. Well, thank you.
The other thing is that it's not just a case of going in and accepting what someone says, and I think that's the kind of the big thing that we had as a result of going to a podiatrist. It was the fact that we did want answers, and we wanted, you know, and we were asking those questions why, and it was just like, well, this is how it is, this is how it is, this is how it is, and it's not good enough. And like you say, that a lot of podiatrists have specialisms that they don't. It's just to be so nice if they just said, like, I'm not a runner. I don't understand the running function and stuff like that. We do this, and you might be better suited to someone that has an understanding of it. But it's just getting another perspective on it that just makes us feel a little bit more empowered about what we do with our own feet, and knowing that we can do something about it, and it's not just a case of your feet are shot, you're old, there's nothing we can do about it. And I think that's the real value that it brings. Yeah, use a crutch. That's it.
Yeah. Look, we refer amongst our team, even in the same clinic, we refer to each other and sit there and think that somebody's going to be more suitable for that patient. And having the confidence to do that is fantastic. It's knowing what you're good at, knowing what someone else is good at. And I've been influenced by so many great practitioners over the years. Physiotherapists and the like, where once I was assessed and treated one way, that became my gold standard. And anything less than that from the global approach was like, what's this? Like, this is very ordinary. So the better the treatment is you have somewhere, or the person that wants to work with you. So this is one of my big concepts as well. I don't fix anybody. I've been treating feet for a long time. I don't fix feet. I don't fix anybody. I work with them. And again, I'm not smart enough to come up with that in foresight, but that's the stuff that I will teach younger practitioners, is that we're not here to fix people, we're here to work with them. And once you start working with the person, is that you're a team, and they're going to come back and they're going to tell you what's working well, what's not. It's all data. You can sit there and build the next plan. And my favorite thing that any patient will ever say to me in the room is, that makes sense. Because if I'm explaining it correctly to them and they say that makes sense, my job's done at that point in time. Whereas with you two, if you're asking the why, if patients are asking me why and I don't know, I'm going to tell them I don't know. Or I'm going to sit, like, there's many things that I won't know in the appointment, and I'll sit there and I will just sit there and think, let me think about this. And then I might even say, I'm going to chat to a couple of people. I'm going to come back to you with that one, because I'm okay with not knowing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you much. Well, thank you so much for your help. And if you want us to put you in touch with Chris McDougall, he's writing a book at the moment, his follow-up to Free to Run, which is looking at the advice of how to actually put into practice the suggestions he had from the first book. And I'm sure he'd love to hear from you.
I would love to, because as I said, I read that first book and I swore he stole all my good material, so I might as well just give it to him in advance. And no, I would love that. That'd be fantastic, even just to sit there and talk to him. I'm influenced by so many other people, from patients, from practitioners, from strength and conditioning coaches, from so many people, and that's what I take into my work. It's all information and help, so that'd be fantastic.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again for your time, Tim, and hopefully speak to you at some point in the future.
Definitely. Thanks, boys.
Cheers.
You happy now, Jody? You feel empowered?
I do feel empowered. I feel like we've had the consult that we always wanted. I'm really happy. The idea that actually, that you can do. Sure, it's going to be work, and sure, there's going to be things. But the whole idea that you can't do anything about something is just it's so hard to accept. It's so hard to accept, and maybe you're not going to have the same level of function or things like that. But I see it as much. What I like is that he has a bunch of protocols that you can kind of follow and are kind of obvious. Yeah. And I totally buy into the whole, which is so much common sense, but I buy into the whole fix your lifestyle, and that'll fix a lot of the issues. Like what you do most of the time, which isn't related to running, will have a big impact on your body when you are running as well. So I think that's a big thing. I'm not so sure about the whole run. We was talking about like running quietly. It reminded me of running quietly and relaxing. It reminded me of chi running, which I always talk about. I keep talking about it, and no one else ever mentions it because I don't know if anyone else has read it. But it was kind of a similar thing. And with that, it was more of you were trying to plant your foot you'd run across. What you do, it asks you to run across sand. And you have to plant your foot, so it created the least amount of indentation, which normally meant a kind of a midfoot strike in order to kind of balance it out and everything like that. But I just don't think. I think if I did that at the moment, it would just look bloody awful.
Yeah. But it sounds like, because that probably is fairly similar. Like the actually, would it be? Yeah, the more the indentation, the more the noise, because the more the force.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Actually, it's probably
Yeah.
And I used to be. You could hear me coming a mile off when I used to run. I don't know now. I'd have to check again. But that is something that is easy to work on. Is like just sound less than you do. And we I've done that in the past. Certainly something I'll focus on in the future. And I think you're right as well. You just want the person to say, actually, I'm not an expert into the level of detail that you are wanting me to be, and just that awareness of people to say. So if you want someone who is specifically going to deal with running, maybe you need to ... And that's all you want, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Rather than, no, I'm right, you're wrong.
Oh yeah, exactly. Just this idea, like, actually, if you work on your running, or the sort of the mechanics when you're running, that will have an impact. I mean, it's such common sense.
Yeah.
If you have better running technique, you will have it will improve all sorts of things. Your thighs, your hips, everything else like that. So it's really obvious. It's just the thought that we kind of start with the feet and that's it, which was really interesting. He was obviously thinking. Tim was obviously thinking in terms of practical ways of getting someone to focus on it. So focusing on, like, start with the posture, make sure you don't lean forward. That's really interesting about the leaning forward thing, because that's the kind of thing that I always thought you had to do. And you do. It's difficult not to kind of lean forward and bend at the hips, and it's really difficult to know how you look, because I got, when I did this, like literally 10 years ago or something, when I got Libby to film, and I thought, oh, I've got a lovely, perfect, straight thing. And I looked at it, I'm like, God, that looks fucking terrible. It looked dreadful. But you kind of need someone else there, don't you, to do it, which is a bit of a shame that there is no, that it's kind of, well, we kind of suspected it, that we're going to have to kind of root out podiatrists who have this function as well. And so I think maybe that's something that we need to do. If you listener, if you're viewer, if you know a podiatrist who seems to kind of like fit that mold of being able to understand the particular issues that a runner has and subscribes to the kind of philosophy that Tim was talking about, then share it with us, and we can create our own kind of list, because I think there's a massive, for considering this is probably one of the, when we've been talking about podiatry, it's probably one that we've had the most amount of feedback on. Well, the Tim Noakes one has just come out, so it'll probably be the second highest. Whoa, the second highest amount of feedback on. But it shows you that there's lots of different things. What I also love is that I posted a picture, because I got some 5 fingers, Vibram 5 fingers, just to wear around the house. I'm not going to go running, just to wear around the house, so I don't step on Lego or anything else like that, and everything. And like the amount of messages I got from people going, "Oh, your calves! Oh, you're going to end up with plantar fasciitis! Oh, you're gonna. It's dangerous to have your feet, your toes separated in that way." There's just so much related to Barefoot and everything that goes with it. And
I think the running industry, the running community, suffered a collective trauma a year after Christopher McNeil came out, and we never got past that.
We said, didn't we? We said everyone that went out and did it, it's still fighting the.
So do bad is even our own recording software has just cut us off because it's been too long, 2 hours. You know why? Because it's quite a detailed issue, and actually I thought Tim had some really, really good, instead of just being someone who told how he could help, he actually gave lots of good examples of what you can do, and everyone should be brushing their teeth on one foot from now on for the rest of their lives. There you go, barefoot, just as a starting point. But if you want us to interview any other experts, any other guests in the future, then do reach out to me or letters at badboyrunning.com or message me on Instagram. We didn't have a chance to put Tim's details out in advance, but typically if you follow us on Instagram, you can then ask questions directly, because we do say who will be on, and we'll then put them to the expert or to the running celebrity that we have on. Jody, anything throw into the
Yeah,
mix?
I say if you want to, when we do put those things out, and probably as a result of this, you might want to share your experience and speak to others who have been in a similar situation, and that's where the Facebook group's particularly useful. So if you want to join the Facebook group, head to Bad Boy Running Podcast on Facebook, answer 3 questions, and you can join the conversation there.
And if you know of a podiatrist, or you are a running podiatrist, and you feel that you have the similar methodology, then let us know, because we'll tell the podcast, because we do feel that this is an area that runners aren't informed about and aren't catered for to the extent that they need to be currently. So do share your details and we will happily promote your business. Thanks for listening, guys. Please do rate and review us. It really helps us get guests, and we will see you next time.